Hello and welcome to the first discussion in our reading group for the Malazan books. We're going to start with the first book, Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson, but we plan to read through the whole Malazan book series by both Erikson and Esselmont. We'll probably interweave them in publication order. We made a little bit of an announcement video about this reading group when we meet and how to participate if you're interested and so on. I'll link to that in the description. But with me, of course, I have the usual group of friends. Steve, could you start us off with introductions? Oh, but actually, before we do that, we read approximately 100 pages each week. Today's discussion is going to be for the prologue and chapters 1 and 2 of Gardens of the Moon. I think we didn't decide how far to go next week, but probably to the end of book 1 seems like a good place to stop. And yeah, if you'd like to join us, check out the pagechewing forum where we do all our planning. Come talk to us about the books or come talk to us about it in the discussion group. Now, Steve, could you start us off with introductions?
Yeah, I'm Steve and happy to be here. It's my third time reading Gardens of the Moon, but as far as the series goes, I've only read up to book 4. So I'm anxious to get started. It's going to be a lot of fun. A very long journey. We are committed. So you guys are stuck.
And Dan?
I'm Dan. I read the first 4 books a couple of times and read books 5, 6, maybe 7 one time. Who knows? But the other ones I haven't read. So I'm interested in seeing what I can remember. And in rereading books 2 and 3, which are my favorite ones, of the ones I've read.
And I am Carl. This is my second full time going through the series, but my third time reading the first 3 books. I had a sort of a weird reading journey for my first time through the main 10 Book of the Fallen, and then I have read a couple of the Esselmont books and enjoyed them, and I am just so glad to be back here with my friends, talking about another series after finishing the second Apocalypse. I know that made that reading journey much more manageable and more fun. I would have been fun regardless because those are great books, but similarly here, I know I'm going to have even more fun actually having someone to talk to this time around.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the talking to someone. Sorry, Steve, you were saying.
No, I was going to say, because Carl won't do it. I want to plug Carl's book. Everyone who enjoys fantasy, go read Truth of Crowns. We'll have a link in the description below. It's a great book. And if you enjoy fantasy and lots of tragedy and lots of great characters and political intrigue and all that fun stuff, go check it out. Go give it a read and you will not be sorry.
Well, and thank you, Steve.
Yes, of course. And before we get started, I have a couple of questions for Varsha as we're getting started on this journey, since you are the leader of whatever this group is called that we haven't decided yet.
Our adjunct? You are adjunct, Varsha?
Yes. That's going to stick.
Right.
That feels more like the Empress or something.
Yeah, there you go. We had Steve Swatha for Baker's books, and now, yeah. What are you? Are you adjunct Varsha? You Empress Varsha? What's the title here?
I don't know. I think I like adjunct.
You'll find it. You'll find it in time. Power finds people, as the series shows.
Steve Swatha was coined, so I gotta permanently change my name too.
I'll do it. I'm the one. I got Steve Swatha, so I will name you Varsha.
Okay.
You won't be able to.
Thank you.
You won't be able to escape it. Sorry, hate to break it to you.
Adjunct Varsha.
Yeah.
All right, our adjunct. Where are we starting?
Prologue?
Oh, Steve was asking questions.
Yeah, just a couple questions really quickly because I want to have to put you on the spot. But the first one is, people are always saying how intimidating the series is to read. What's advice for new readers who are starting the journey with us for what can they kind of, what would you, and also Dan and Carl, if you have answers to this too, please chime in. But what advice would you give new readers coming into this series with us?
Oh, I think One is there's a huge cast list, but it's fine if you don't remember names. I made free use of the search function on Kindle to try and figure out where I met someone before, whether I have met someone before. And very often we meet characters that we never meet again. And so it's fine to forget about them. I think one thing about the series that was interesting for me, I don't tend to remember a lot when I read, but somehow I managed, I took 3 or 4 years to finish this series, and I managed to remember everything that was important or necessary to track some important characters through the series. And that's not because I remember well, because I certainly don't. Pick my favorite book, I won't remember how it ended. But it's because I think the author does somehow reminds us of the details that tend to become important. That's what I realized. So don't get bogged down by details. Don't let the large cast of characters overwhelm you, I think. And I think Thomas had a really good suggestion on the forum. He said also to be okay with not understanding things. And I like that too, because many things are like puzzle pieces that sort of will fit together. You just gotta pick up, collect the pieces, and then eventually when the picture forms, I think it's really cool. So that's one, I guess. And the other thing is to not read the series in isolation. I did that with Wheel of Time and it was not fun. I was just waiting for it to be over. I cannot imagine having this series be the only thing I read. In fact, I read multiple books simultaneously. This was probably when I started doing that, because I only picked up these books when I was in the mood for them, and I was often in the mood for them. I only had capacity for I don't know, a couple of chapters at a time, then I'd go away for a week or two and come back to them. So yeah, just read them at whatever pace suits you and not to keep up with anybody, I guess. That's Carl. Dan, do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that it really is important to let it kind of wash over you. If you get caught up in the details, you will suffer, and you will get really frustrated because there's a lot of terminology thrown at you. There are a lot of different characters thrown at you, and the ones that matter and the terms you need to understand, you will remember and you will come to understand as we go along. Like there oftentimes a magical term or a title will be thrown at you without a definition. And sometimes from the context around it, you can kind of piece together what it is. But sometimes you just have to keep reading and you'll piece together, oh, a fist is like a it's not a governor. That's like a mayor, isn't it? I think a fist is a mayor, and then what is it? High fist. High fist is like a governor.
You
And
close
like
your
one of those
hand
things.
and you.
Yeah. And so you just have to kind of go with the flow and trust. And if you've read Dune kind of does approaches things similarly. And then the last thing I would say is this series has a very unusual structure, and in many ways the books are all very standalone, and sometimes you get wildly different cast of characters between books. And so while there is, I think, a thematic through line and some plot points that kind of trail throughout the whole series, you just have to know and be comfortable that you're gonna constantly be knocked on your ass, and you just have to be okay with that. And that the payoff is worth it, I should say. As a first time reader, it can be easy to be like, oh my God, is he gonna, land this thing? Are all these books gonna be worth it? And while I'm sure you'll enjoy some of the books more than others, it absolutely is a worthwhile journey. And I think you'll be able to tell that too by book two, whether or not this series is for you.
Cool.
And Dan, any?
Each book has somewhat of a story of its own.
Mm.
So, even if you give up on the third book, you can still be somewhat happy because you've somewhat read three somewhat self-contained stories.
Yeah, that's really important. I mean, we're coming off Second Apocalypse, where really it's like each book is not self-contained. You
Yeah.
know, it is kind of the first trilogy is its own story, and then the latter quadrilogy is its own story, and those are connected, but those are kind of, you could say in some way, contained storylines, and that's really Malazan is different, where every book is its own narrative.
So if you have your favorite, you could even just later just come back and read your favorite one or two ones, right?
So
Before
what
this
I think I
you're
might have
saying?
done it at some point.
Yeah, I was about to go back and reread Toll the Hounds, which is my favorite.
Yeah.
It's actually apparently a controversial pick for favorite.
Really?
But then we decided we're all, doing this read along. No, I mean, Toll the Hounds, that's book 8, is
Oh boy, okay.
wildly loved by the people who love it, and some other people think it's a little too ponderous and have some criticism. I don't want to get into it because we are so far from it.
Ah,
But
that one. Okay.
I love it dearly. It's my favorite of the books.
It's only like
it's mine too.
13,000 pages away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you didn't do that math in the number of years it's going to take us to get there.
Only
This
3
takes a
years or
while.
something?
Yeah, it'll take like 3 or 4 years. Yeah.
We're also doing the SF Masterworks reading group. We read one in the SF Masterworks each month. Every time someone says, "Oh, that book is in the SF Masterworks," we just read it when it gets there, and we calculate how long it'll take us, and it's like 10 years from now.
That's crazy.
Anyway, so did you guys want to start at the prologue? Or I don't know, if you're Dan and being fancy, maybe we start at chapter 7.
Maybe.
Yeah, so a 12-year-old boy gets some advice that he does not heed.
Sounds like every 12-year-old boy I've ever known, including myself.
Even the prologue seems very like it feels like there's a lot that's going to pay off much later in the series. It feels very ominous.
Yeah.
That's what I remember from my first read through. Really getting out of it was how ominous it felt. You know, the tension building up, and it kind of a gothic atmosphere. I think it's really good at like kind of building up this atmosphere around Mox Hold and the politics of the Malazan Empire. But there definitely is a lot of foreshadowing here. And the opening image is one that I think becomes much more meaningful after reading the whole series.
Yeah. But you're not supposed to know anything when you read it first time.
No, yeah, you're not. Yeah, you're not expecting. No, there's so much going on behind the scenes here. A lot that is implied. I do also appreciate, just as a prologue for a singular book, how this does set up the rest of the book. It introduces you to major players and kind of the major overarching conflict, I guess you could say, about the Malazan Empire and how it operates, and Lasine, as the Empress now after the prologue, and I think it's fair to say that is it Ganos or Ganoese? I'm never certain. I've heard different
Ganoese?
podcasters say things different ways, and I forget. I'm sure I've heard Steven Erikson say his name, but I cannot remember for the life of me.
I think the narrator calls him Ganos, right?
Ganos.
Really?
Okay.
I think.
Ganos'
Yeah.
parent. Well, that he, continues to be a character we follow. And Whiskey Jack as well. We get this little taste of the bridge burners, and Fiddler, who briefly appears, who that's definitely someone to knock away there, although he'll come back. You'll be reminded of him. But there's just a lot they talk about here that I adore.
I love the "You want to live free, boy, live quietly" line.
Yeah, I like that. I think that one's a very often highlighted one.
Good. It sets well the mood of a book, I guess.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Again, it's just so good for building up that atmosphere and the tone of everything that's coming up. You get into, talking about naming and the power of names. I think that's a major thematic through line in this series. And, one of the main things it talks about here, right, is Surly taking on the nameless scene, the Empress to be, and how she is changing her names. And I mean, God, getting back to just the amount of characters, there are. It's not just that you're remembering all of the characters, you have to remember all their different names. So that's something to be prepared for.
Yeah.
And also to be comfortable knowing that sometimes people are going to be referred by their names, and you're not necessarily going to know immediately that this is someone you've met before, and you'll piece that together as you go along. And maybe we'll bring it up in the conversation, and that'll be how you figure it out. Because I know I had a couple of times looking stuff up that I was like, oh my God, that was that person the entire time?
Yeah.
How did I miss that? So yeah, definitely got to be prepared for that. But yeah, the power of names, it's a big thing.
And I think some of the best reveals in the series are around, oh, this person was actually that person who you met before. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Any other thoughts about Gano's or our introduction to Whiskey Jack or the Empress here, or the dead Emperor?
The Emperor's not dead yet, right? In the prologue, but he will be
Right.
dead by the time we come back to
Right. Well, we
Ganos.
open, I mean, I guess even before the prologue, right? We open with that poem. We open with a couple
Oh,
poems.
yes.
Maybe that's worth.
Oh, yeah. The Emperor is
God,
dead.
I love. Well, okay. First of all, I love the opening, the very opening poem of "Now these ashes have grown cold. We open the old book. These oil-stained pages recount the tales of the fallen, afraid empire, words without warmth. The hearth has ebbed, its gleam and life sparks are but memories against dimming eyes. What casts my mind, what hue my thoughts as I open the book of the fallen and breathe deep the scent of history. Listen then to these words carried on that breath. These tales are the tales of us all, again yet again. We are history relived, and that is all. Without end, that is all." So good.
Nice.
And it, again, that's another one that, like, with the context of the whole series, it hits harder. I'll just say, once you get to the end of book 10, there are things about all of this that it's just, whew, it's sweet the way it hits, and there are added layers to this. So something to look forward to 10 years from now when we reach the end.
I'm sure I'll forget about this by then.
We can come back to this one poem when we finish.
Oh, yes.
If we remember. But yeah, I love that opening poem. And I think a lot of the poems I find hard to understand because I'm bad at reading poetry in general. But I think I'm starting to get more now through the reread. I think, again, like Carl said, I understand a lot more of what's being referred to here. But what stood out to me is we are history relived, and that is all. Without end, that is all. I loved that such what feel profound words to me are followed by that is all. Like the juxtaposition of that, I love. It's beautiful.
And yeah, the language there is gorgeous.
Yeah. And then we have the poem about the emperor and his mastered companion.
Yeah, this is interesting because we're all. This is none of our first time reading it, so we'll have to be careful. I mean, I don't know. Dan says he's forgotten everything, and Steve, I don't know what you remember from these, but there's a lot going on here that, with the hindsight of even just the first few books, you have a different point of view, I'll say. Even having read the first, like my first time kind of attempting the series, I read the first 3 books, and then I don't remember why, but I took a long break, and I'd forgotten so much that I decided to reread it, and that's when I read all 10 books. And that said, I did come into it then knowing some things that added, that I think if you do remember some of the major details and plot points that envelop over these first few books, you do have a different perspective already, even just with a handful of the books of these opening pages. And that's something we'll have to dance around for sure. But gosh, what I know I find it very interesting that a potentially major plot point, before you have any context of the series as a whole and the characters in it, is dropped in a poem. The emperor is dead, right? Talking about him and his right-hand man are dead. That you have not met these people. You don't know anything about this empire. and Steven Erikson is like, by the way, the Emperor is dead. And then we open up on what we eventually find out is like the night he is going to be murdered. And it's a very non-traditional way, I would think, of opening. In some ways, it feels almost very it almost feels like a play. Like I feel like the way that poem opens almost it feels very Shakespearean to me. Like that feels like a way that like someone would come out and say that, um, like a little opening monologue on stage. That's what it kind of reminds me of. And then you jump into that actual scene properly. Um, but also the name Fellison at the end there definitely has some meaning to I think readers of the series.
It almost sets up this. I don't want to say it sets up. Well, it sets up tension. It kind of makes the reader a little bit uncomfortable. Not uncomfortable in a bad way, but almost like there's a lot going on here, and we're not coming into it at the very beginning of the story. There's not a lot of. It doesn't really waste any time getting you into it, and it just kind of throws you into the world. So it's a little bit. I don't want to say jarring, but it is a little bit. Right off the bat, you feel like there's a lot happening. You don't really start off with somebody walking through a field and having a nice conversation. It's the Emperor's dead, and here you are. So
Yeah.
it's kind of it doesn't waste any time.
Well, and with the prologue too, it's interesting that while there is all this tension and obviously the mouse quarter in the city is burning and all this stuff is going on, we only start with a quiet kind of conversation of this like kid, you know, looking at, you know, this riot battle going on. But really it's about him talking to this old soldier, right? That's the core, the emotional core of the prologue. Something very understated. And I mean, hats off to Steven Erikson because I think that takes confidence
Yeah.
in a fantasy series, you know, to not open up with big magic explosions or, you know, actually not opening up with showing the Emperor's death, right? Do you just see a boy, you know, looking out from like a fortress and talking to an old soldier? Or I guess he's not actually that old. He just seems older than he actually is because he's so grizzled and has, you know, seen the shit on the front lines. What are your thoughts about this prologue, Dan?
I'm trying to remember, because I guess I don't remember any of the overarching narrative, so I only remember like the individual stories of the books vaguely. So I don't remember if there's any spoilers in here for the future, but you know, if you're rereading, you would notice because I'm not noticing much. I know there's stuff going on with Emperor. I don't remember any of it. I know there's stuff going on with the Empress. I don't remember any of it. I remember vaguely that I liked the Empress when I read it the first time, but I don't know why. So
Lucine is a great character. She is, I would say in general in the series, she's as understated as her appearance. I feel like is in this prologue, but also as impactful and interesting. And Lucine is a fascinating character, I think.
yeah, but like the prologue part does seem very, I don't know. It does seem like quite in line with modern prologues of fantasy series, I think, where you want to show like something is already happening, like you want an action at the beginning somewhat, but you also want it somewhat, you want some sort of a bit like an intimate part of the setting, like you don't want too much going on. And you want to just focus on maybe a couple of people. There's also something happening big in this, you know, in the prologue, but you don't want to actually go, oh no, there's a huge battle going on and stuff like that. You want to focus on a couple of characters. There's also something big going on, and then you start the series. But again, this came out a while ago, so I'm thinking like recent trends.
I would push back. I think this is even more like quieter than your usual fantasy prologue these days because usually I agree with you, there is an element of like having some sort of intimate character moment. But oftentimes, whether like you think about, I mean, this is still, it's not a new book now, but we were reading The Darkness That Comes Before, and there's violence in that opening, and there are kind of shifts in the story that happen very directly on page, right? And usually there is like a murder or something, you think of the Game of Thrones famous prologue now, right? Where like shit is happening, right? As opposed to here, none of the characters try to kill each other. There are kind of some quiet threats made, but it's not really like the violence is happening in many ways off screen. Again, that feels very play-esque to me, that it's like it's these characters watching this dramatic event unfold, but it's not really about that event so much. It is the emotional conversation these two characters are having. It actually reminds me, the only prologue I can think of that really to me is as quiet as this is the opening to, and I won't spoil it, but opening of Guy Gavriel Kay's Tigana, which also has a very quiet prologue that's really just a conversation between two characters, and isn't actually about the seismic event that is unfolding or about to unfold.
But it does feel more modern compared to like the classical, like, oh, you just description of the normal life in the farm of your protagonist, and then it slowly incrementally goes
concerning
up, right?
hobbits.
Yeah, well, all the classical Shannara and all those other things, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with what you said. Yeah.
I really like the description about the play because I think the first chapter, at least the beginning, before we start focusing on Baran, the switches between the conversation between the fisher girl and the old woman, and then to the two people who do something devious to them, and I guess to the whole army. The switches between those, they feel very discreet. I was thinking of some old shows in that I used to watch in Hindi or Tamil, in which I guess something happens, and then there are these like two tricksters or two gods, which is like chatting about how they made that happen. So this feels a bit like that. So I like that description of this being like a play. I think that that kind of exactly describes how I was thinking about those scenes, how they felt to me as I was reading them.
It really does evoke that classic. I mean, you talk about shows you watch in Hindi. It also reminds me of like kind of old, Greek myths or like plays, like the Iliad and things like that, where you would just have the gods appear and be exactly like, oh, I am manipulating things. I'm doing this thing, I'm causing this, and like sometimes they'd argue and be like, well, no, my champion is gonna, best you, no, mine is gonna best you, that sort of thing. And you have that sort of, I'm moving on to chapter 1, right? We get a scene like that, you're right, where it really does evoke that sort of classic mythic storytelling with these two figures that they refer to themselves as gods. Certainly. So I think it's fair to say there are gods in the series. So, I don't think that's a spoiler. We're introduced to them. These are divine beings, and they're playing some sort of game. They got some sort of intent.
And you were talking earlier about names being powerful. I think one of them names the other, and it's like, shh, don't, we don't want anyone to know.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. No, I mean, that's why they decide they can't let the girl live or live as she was. So they lead to decide to, well, they do something to her, certainly. I think exactly what it is unclear at this point, right?
All I know is it turns her into this utterly terrifying looking person, apparently, that people don't even want to look at without flinching.
That's one thing. Did everyone kind of track Sari's story there between the chapters?
Kind of, yeah. But with that, so she's the fisher girl, I think she's referred to, and she has the conversation with, I believe, is Riga. Is that the old woman?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they have what felt like a very meaningful conversation there. with we're now connected and they're now one person. Is that because Riga is killed when
Yeah.
she's kind of slapped in the head with an armored fist or an armored hand, and she topples over and I believe dies. But it feels like they're sharing consciousness now. They're connected and they're forever connected in some way, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's fair to say it is written really subtly, but it's not a spoiler because it happens on page that the spirit of the wax witch Riga goes inside of the fisher girl's body, right? And that's before the gods even show up. That's how that opens. I also think it's an interesting choice that we in the opening of chapter 1 are introduced to kind of the ordinary people who are being conquered by the Malazan Empire. And while I don't know that Riga is the most sympathetic character, she does immediately invite people, the reader, to criticize the Malazan Empire,
Mm-hmm.
right? That she's essentially calling them like, we once were independent, we once had our own kings and blah, blah, blah. And it definitely is a potent thematic choice for I think this individual novel, but also the series as a whole, which is very much concerned with imperialism
Mm-hmm.
and the consequences of it. And I don't think it even necessarily has a black and white thematic point of view there. But, I mean, similarly, you could say Riga is like herself. She's terrible. She's like capturing people's souls and storing them in candles. Like that's what she does. That's her magic. And I guess she does it partially to like foretell the future, but at the same time, she is a conquered person who has lost her basically everyone she ever loved. She explains to war and to this conquest.
Yeah, I think the way that she explains she lost what her husband or husbands and her kids, I believe 5 total, and all she has with her she only gets a certain amount of help, of financial assistance because of those who have died. I think that says a lot about, like you said, the Malazan Empire and kind of what their priorities are and kind of what it's like to be on the outside of the battles too. So it does a lot's said there with that with that section with her in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So sorry, I'm starting sort of a secondary thread about Riga. The candles, I sort of, as I was reading, I thought maybe she's burning. So each candle is a trapped soul, right? And they are devoured in flame. Those are the words used here. Souls devoured in flame. And I sort of thought that she was burning the candles. The souls trapped in those candles were those of the people from her family that she lost. But now I'm wondering if that's true. Is she just randomly trapping any 5 souls to burn them just to replace the ones she lost and doing some strange necromancy there?
That is a good question. I did not even consider the possibility that those were her loved ones in the candles. I had kind of taken it as classic witchy behavior of I am killing people and stealing their souls, but I actually think you may be right. That to me feels, I mean, first of all, it feels very Malazan, knowing how this series likes to play with tropes and fantasy, particularly fantasy and kind of fairy tale tropes. Yeah, you may be right, because all we know is that she has stored some souls in candles, and that does help her magic, I guess, but also that they're weak souls. They're described as the gods refer to them in that way. And so maybe they are her relatives. Maybe they're like her dead kids and husband. And I mean, that's an interesting idea. I have never heard that proposed before. So that's a wow. Yeah.
So why I thought that is she says 5 candles I burn every night, 5 candles to keep old Riga company, and like it's 5 because she lost 5 people. But that's why I thought it's people from her family. But then here it says souls devoured in flame. Like that means the candle as it burns is devouring them somehow, I guess. But
Maybe.
also, not to get too deep into it, we'll move on to other topics, I promise. But what happens when a candle burns out? Does she transfer the soul over to a new candle if it is her loved ones? Anyway, I have many questions about how Rigga operates.
I thought that she just used the souls and consumed them with the candles to do her witchcraft. That's how I read it. Very, very straightforward.
That makes sense.
Same.
That's probably
Yeah,
what it
I
is.
didn't think much more. Yeah.
No, I think you're onto something, Varsha. I think that's very intentional. Again, that the 5 lost loved ones, 5 souls and candles.
Yeah.
There is an element of tragedy for this character. I mean, she's not very pleasant, and she is very like coded in a classic kind of creepy witch way. Not least because she ends by possessing this child.
Yeah.
But it's I even if she is not necessarily the most like pleasant person, a lot of horrible stuff has happened to her. And so, I do think that there's something the element of grief in play there, and how her magic, whether directly her kind of keeping the souls of her loved ones around her, or like as a kind of a substitute
Mm.
for those souls, one way or another. I do think that that is very intentional, and I think that's a very clever reading. I'm glad you pointed that out. See, this is why these conversations are amazing. I never would have thought about that. I've always just been like this creepy witch lady who makes some good points about imperialism, and then just decides, oh, I'm gonna possess this girl because fuck you, that's why,
Yeah.
And here you go, and you're like, wait, there's potentially way more going on here. I like your reading. I prefer your reading, Varsha.
So I
It just
ask
adds a
dumb
lot of
questions
pathos.
and I get called clever. Nice. I will remember.
Yeah.
Cool.
I do remember, though, every time I read this part, I'm like, why? And maybe it's explained after and I forgot about it. But it's like, why does she possess her? Like that sequence of events at the beginning, why she possesses her, and then coincidentally she's the only one that survives and gets chosen. I remember when I read it the first time, I was like, I don't understand why this happened.
Wasn't she like dying and she also knows that the girl is in danger, so she does something to protect her? And she's
Kind of,
making use of herself to
but it's
protect
just
her.
very like, why is the girl the only one that survives that? It's just it's a series of coincidences, which
Well,
I
I can tell
don't
you why the girl's
understand what the purpose
the,
is.
the only one who survives, because the fucking gods decided
Yeah,
she was going to.
but why did they choose her? Is it because of a witch that they chose her? I don't think so, right? But again, I don't remember.
No, it's because she overheard their names.
Yeah, but then it's just a coincidence that she's also the person that you know.
Yes.
It just to me it feels very, like you said, very like play-like,
Yes.
And
I
again,
do.
it's also because we all know that this is all from an RPG, right?
Right.
So this does feel to me like in an RPG it's very play-like because it's like people acting other people, right? So to me, a lot of this does feel very RPG-like. I can see people, role-playing these characters and playing a whole campaign and all these sort of things. It's like I can see even, and I can see the game master thinking about, oh, that's a great hook to make the story interesting, and you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think for any listeners who don't know, this setting did start as it actually started as a D&D setting, and then gradually got changed by the authors Steven Erikson and Ian Esselmont.
I
Started
think it's actually they played GURPS, I think.
Yes, but before that it was AD&D.
Yeah, I think it started as
Into a
AD&D,
lot
but
of
we're like,
conversations. This is one of these things
yeah,
I feel. Also, you can tell the I'll just say there's definitely some of the races you can be like, oh, this is them twisting the classic
yeah.
D&D races. And I'll leave it at that for now. We're not there yet. But yeah, no, I mean, in terms of a hook, I want to bounce off of that to say
Hmm.
something that stood out to me this time is the way that this plays on classic fantasy tropes of the farm boy chosen one
Mm.
sort of thing. Is you have this ordinary girl who literally becomes the chosen one of a couple gods, one god in particular, and I think it's fair to say that she doesn't come out of that the happiest, most, crazy shit happens, right? She joins the army and quickly, rises up through the ranks and survives some terrible shit, as we'll get into. But it's not like that made her life better. You know, it helped her survive, but also in some ways was kind of the worst thing that has happened to her. And is an interesting, I thought, take on that trope.
Not to add to this whole exchange of with Riga and the Fisher Girl, but did Riga swap over to Sari's body because she knew that she would survive somehow? She foretold that she would be the only survivor.
That's my feeling. I think she saw that and decided to hop into her body for that reason. I don't know.
I don't remember if there was like, is there divination magic like that in this universe? I
Yes.
can't remember.
Yes.
Okay, there it is.
No, I mean, she explicitly says prophetic stuff there.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm pretty
there's
sure
a whole
Well, but-
paragraph.
wax candles are tied to that as well.
It's different saying random prophetic shit and be like, oh, in the next 10 seconds, I know what's gonna happen. You know what I mean?
Right. I think she did. I think that's why she
Okay, I see.
made that decision. I just don't know.
Yeah. I
What-
think she's seeing what is going to happen to this girl, right?
Okay.
Because she's saying they'll put a sword in your hand, they'll give you a fine horse, and they'll send you across the sea, but a shadow will embrace your soul. So, and I guess that literally happens. Maybe we can guess that the shadow embracing her soul is whatever the god does to her. So she is seeing what's coming up in the next few minutes.
But we don't know if she knows that everyone else is gonna be killed because she doesn't say
Probably
that.
not. Yeah.
But maybe she does. I guess we just don't know.
I don't know if the fact of her being the lone survivor plays a role in what Riga does. I think
Okay, I
one,
see.
she's dying, and two, she knows this girl is in danger. So rather than go peacefully, go gently into
Yeah.
the good night. Riga plants herself.
Yeah, but
into this
Riga,
girl.
like, she's the reason why she because she bullied the girl. If she didn't bully the girl, then the soldier wouldn't have started hitting, wouldn't have hit her. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Like,
That's true. The circularity of prophecy.
yes.
I mean, that's the classic prophecy thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, do you make the prophecy happen by trying to avoid it or what? Like
Mm-hmm.
it is that circularity.
True.
So are we all again following kind of the girl whose name or the name we know her by, other than Fisher Girl, is Sari, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we all follow kind of her journey from there on through, joining the Malazan army and
Well, we haven't seen much of her for these two chapters, I guess.
right. But we do know, and we know eventually in chapter 2 we find out she joined the bridge
Yeah.
burners, right? I mean, that's really the next important.
She
chapter
joined the
in her
bridge
story.
burners and is freaking the hell out of all her companions.
Yeah, she's being really
Coordinates.
creepy and like intense, and they're all like, "What is her deal? She's 15 years old. Like, oh my god."
Yeah. You should probably feel that something wrong going on there.
Yeah, by
Then
the way,
why-
I can't believe that they're just like letting this. First of all, she's like 12 or 13 when she enlists, and they just accept this random girl, and then she's 15, and they're like, "Yeah, she's one of us. Like, she's one of this elite squad of like now outcast people." Like, this is crazy. Like, I mean, we'll see what she can do later on, but like, come on, like this girl is like barely in puberty. Like, what's going on here?
If it was me, I would have thought there was like there's some trick going on. Someone is trying to do something to it's like it's
I think they know. Like, I think they know that something is
Yeah.
wrong, but they don't know what it is. And they're like just waiting for it to reveal itself, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
I
so,
will-
yeah.
I want to watch the dark or read the dark comedy novel of her like having to clean the latrines and just be given the shittiest jobs, and then she like fucking ices some guy, and they're like, "Oh my god, I guess this like teenage girl can like fight on the front lines." You know, like we're not just gonna have her clean our like shit dishes. Like she can actually fight with us. Like what is her journey? You know what I mean? Like she enlists. Like they're not gonna like be like, all right, go like blow. You know, here's a bomb. Go blow it up. Or like here's a sword. Go kill people. Like I'm sure they're like, all right, like fetch our food. You know. And somehow she ended up joining the bridge burners and becoming the what
She
she.
did specifically ask for bridge burners.
That's
That's
right.
true.
And they are sappers, so maybe they just sent her to dig the tunnels.
Well, sappers are part of their regiment. Yes, that's not all they are, but yes.
I guess no, but yeah.
So when she's enlisting, let's finish, I guess, talking about Sorry before we move on to other topics. When she's enlisting, the guy taking her name down, he feels a headache coming on, and he has a moment where he tries to thinks that he should refuse or not let her enlist. But then he has all these other thoughts and a headache that's not letting him think straight. But as soon as she's done enlisting, the headache somehow magically disappears.
Yeah.
You make a good point. There's definitely presumably divine magic going on that is influencing her fate and allowing her to move through these things, right?
Probably didn't drink enough during the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah,
happens.
he's just dehydrated.
So he just had a sip of water between when he wrote her name down and when she went away.
It comes and goes.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah. Do we know? Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to slightly change the topic. So Dan, if
Okay. No, I was just wondering, do we know how long it is after that happens and they all die? They're all killed? Is it like immediately after?
Yes.
Okay.
After what happens?
I was about to ask.
After she gets enlisted.
And that's 2 years, right?
2 years, yeah.
Well, okay, which time that everyone dies? Because there are
But
multiple.
no, I mean, no, after like the massacre on that island or whatever, where the girl is from, right?
Oh, yeah, that's immediate. Yeah, I think she enlists immediately after everybody dies.
Okay. But I guess, yeah, there must be some sort of caravan going out of the city and then... Okay, I see. So like very quickly after.
Because I wanted to clarify, everyone is aware that, because again, this happens on page. This is like directly happens, but it is kind of subtly written. It's not explained that the gods summoned those hounds, which then went off and murdered all the Malazans.
Yeah.
Okay, we're all on the same page
I
there.
did not catch that. I just thought that they were summoned by the two men that were there. I forget their names. I thought that they had summoned the hounds.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, it's correct. Correct.
Okay.
And then the hounds went on to kill
Cotillion
everybody.
and Aminos.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I just remember who they are. Okay. I'm not going to say. But
Don't.
I just remembered. No, I just said the name again.
Okay.
Yeah. They summon the hounds. Cotillion specifically is the one who did some sort of weird magic shit to Sari and led to her joining the Malazan bridge burners.
For some
All
reason.
this happened on page. That is not spoiling anything to come. That is literally what happens in these pages, which is why I want to clarify.
Yeah.
It is a lot of this is kind of understated stuff, and you're just watching people act and like, yeah, it's easy to miss these things, particularly early on in this series.
Another thing that... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
Oh no, I was just saying, and it seems like during the aftermath of this massacre that there's some suspicions on who Sari is and how she just disappeared. So it feels like someone, they have an impression that something happened. It's because they couldn't find her or her dad, and they were trying to locate her. So yeah, it seems like which I thought was fun.
Yeah. We meet the adjunct, right? And she
Yep.
she's the one with all the theories and with very specific information. She knows that a fisher girl and her father survived, and so she's sending out people to find out where they went.
That's something to note. It's seemingly the dad also is alive somewhere out there.
Yeah. It did always strike me like this sort of thing. It's like there seemed to be some leaps of reasoning that let them figure out what was going on. It seemed to me a little bit. They figure out very quickly that she's alive and something happened to her. Like, there's not much for all the cover up that supposedly these people should have done with the, they killed all these people with the hound, so make sure that they didn't figure out that they did this thing. Doesn't do much, really. Because immediately they figure out that it's this girl and something happened, right?
I don't think they know with her. Do they know that something strange is going on? I think they just know the Fisher Girl's a survivor.
I think they know that, like, the Fisher girl is, they're suspicious about her and they're gonna figure out, like, I think the adjunct knows that it's all because it's something with this Fisher girl. Like, she's involved with the thing
So
and that she survived,
I think the reasoning there is probably that she's been left alive, right?
Yeah.
Because their boat hasn't come back. So if they were out, then they should have been back by now. By the way, what happened to that boat? We don't know. But
Oh.
Nope.
yeah, I guess that's why she's interested in them, because she thinks that whoever left the hounds loose was interested in the girl.
But how
But,
could they
yeah.
not have, maybe the girl is, how do they not know she's dead and she's one of the mangled corpses that are about that nobody can recognize?
That's
Is there
true. Yeah.
a way they know?
That's true. I think they said they started with all the houses have dead people
Yeah.
except for two of them. And one of them was the old lady that, did they find her? Did they find Riga's body? And so
I
they
think
knew
Yes,
that
so.
they did.
that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
her hut. And so, yeah, it was a pretty big body count for them to
Yeah.
have done a proper survey and said, okay,
How do they know that those people are in those huts? And they could have,
Right.
there's so many things that technically they could have been,
were there
in
any
other places. But
were
yeah.
there any civilian dead out on the streets, like not in their homes? Because the ones not in huts, I guess, were all the army, right?
I guess.
I mean,
Well,
I don't know exactly logistically how they did it, and they don't show us, so I guess we're just speculating here, but presumably they did a survey, figured out who lived here and who didn't show up, and identified, okay, so this person isn't dead. Fisher Girl is not dead. The weird thing I would say is that they don't name her. Like, that is an obvious
yeah.
Yeah.
exclusion, is they do not give her name or the name of her father. They just say Fisher Girl and father.
Maybe they don't have records over their names or something.
But then that does get to what you're saying, which is like, how did they even identify that they're survivors?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm with you that some of those things are not explained, and it's hard to, I guess, piece together. I took it for granted. I'm like, yeah, I guess they
Yeah.
figured that out,
Again, it doesn't matter. It's,
Yeah, in the grand scheme of the story, it's not that important.
I just thought it's kind of funny how they, this whole thing is a bit for nothing, sort of. Because they could have just come there, grab a girl. It amounts to basically the same thing, kind of. Maybe it would have been even less suspicious. Because just a random girl disappearing from the Empire, who cares? There's probably a lot of them disappearing.
Well, they didn't
Compared to
grab
a
her. I don't
massacre.
think they don't know what's going on with her.
But
Yeah, but
I
it would
I
probably
don't.
bring less attention. It wouldn't bring the adjunct there if a random girl gets kidnapped, right?
Oh, but I think the random girl getting kidnapped was collateral. They set the hounds loose on the army. That's what they wanted to do. The
Yes.
girl was collateral
I
damage
guess so.
because she overheard
Yeah.
their names.
No,
So
the goal is definitely to murder all of the Malazan soldiers with the hounds.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's definitely what's happening there. And the adjunct, I think it's fair to say, the adjunct and the higher ups have a better idea of what's going on in that situation and why it happened than the reader does at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, because I mean, I can tell you as having read the whole thing, I have a pretty decent idea of. I don't necessarily know that I know all the details, but I have a much better idea of what's going on there, and the higher ups definitely have an
Yeah.
idea of what's going on there. And the girl is just kind of collateral.
Okay.
She's a side story
Okay.
as far as they're concerned.
But yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. Is like if you're reading it the first time, I remember, like you're like, oh, it seems like we're doing a bit of leaps of things, but they know things that the reader doesn't know, right?
Right,
That they're using
exactly.
in their reasoning.
And there's a lot of that going forward, I will say.
Yeah.
A lot of the times characters know things that we are not privy to and you just kind of have to accept it because they make decisions where you're like, I don't understand why that person did that thing. What is motivating them? And sometimes you find out later, and sometimes you never find out. And it is just like you're like, oh, I guess they had a reason for it, you know. But it does allow you to interpret, I will say. It does leave open, you know, a lot of motivations sometimes can be, yeah, more open to interpretation.
Yeah. So, Carl, you were going to start a new topic, or did you already get that in?
I was just gonna ask about the hounds, and I mean we've covered it now, but that everyone kind of followed the hounds there. That the two guys who appeared out of shadows, one of whom Amanos and Cotillion, I mean we have names. Amanos and Cotillion appear. Cotillion, you know, Amanos is like, well, we have to kill the girl because she heard our names. So Cotillion does some weird things to her. She is not dead. She becomes the girl now known as Sari, who joins the Bridge Burners. And then they also, Amanos and Cotillion summon the hounds out of shadow, and the hounds go and murder all the Malazans. And I guess the locals as well, presumably. And so we are reintroduced to Gano's Perrin, right? As he is there surveying the corpses.
I guess I was curious before that, how do you guys imagine the hounds? What dog breed do they look like in your mind?
Hairless.
In my mind, they look like Dobermans or something.
Yeah, I think so. Like some hairless breed.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's from a picture I saw or if that's how I imagine them, but lethal, thin, and huge. Because apparently they could crack a man's head in their jaw.
Yeah, they're huge, right?
I'm trying to find. There's one. I mean, they're on some of the covers.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. There are some type of hound that is on some of the covers, and that definitely has influenced what I pictured. But yeah, short hair, really big, scary as hell. I'm trying to think. What is? There's a specific type of
maybe like pit bulls are they in the covers, or like? Oh, no, they're more like wolfhounds or something. There's House of Chains in which they look more like pit bulls or something.
Yeah, pit bulls. Yeah, pit bulls I think is actually a pretty good comparison to what I view. Wolfhound I definitely think is a possibility as well. Although I think
that's told the hounds. There's a wolf or some sort of thing on front of that.
Very big doggos is what they are, and very not nice. Or certainly capable of tearing you to pieces.
They're not giant Saint Bernards or Chihuahuas or Labradors.
Pugs.
No, I mean
giant Chihuahuas. Like the whole thing is that they're tiny.
How terrifying it would be to have a giant Chihuahua.
I was gonna say a giant Chihuahua would be scary as hell because Chihuahuas are mean. I say that my sister has a half Chihuahua and that dog has personality issues, so it would be whoo.
Chihuahuas are assholes for sure.
Yeah.
Like all tiny dogs are. Just... Anyway, yes. Paran, the adjunct. Have we learned her name yet? Or has she just been the adjunct so far?
I thought it's been mentioned at the end of a chapter, but I don't remember.
No, she's named Lorne. This is adjunct Lorne. I think she tells maybe Perrin to call her by her name. She's like, someone is like saying like adjunct, and then she's like, call me Lorne. And then he proceeds to not do that.
Okay. Of course.
I do think it's funny that he is like, I forgot what a kind of like haughty dickhead he is. Like he definitely has a chip on his shoulder. He is vaguely what's the word I'm looking for? Brain fart. But the chain of command is not one that he is following very politely. He
seems very comfortable in his nobility, you know, like he's like this is what he deserves. He's happy to use the privilege that comes with his being noble born. And I think there was some point later when he goes back home, I forget what the interaction was, but he's just very he thinks to himself that I guess there were these people who his ancestors ruled by sword, and they hoarded gold, and now they are hoarding something else. And he wanted, by enlisting as a soldier, he wanted to go back to his ancestral history, right? And that's interesting. Like, that means he's very happy with his heritage and very proud of it, and is very comfortable in his skin as a noble. I thought that was interesting, because I feel like I forgot that about him.
Well,
yeah.
He's comfortable with aspects of it, right? He's not comfortable with that, like, everyone looks down on him for coming from, they call him, like, what do they call him, like silver blood or something like that. And he obviously isn't comfortable with what he views as, like, his father and a lot of the present day nobles being, like, essentially soft, right? It's a very, reminds me of a very Roman attitude to a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of parallels between the Malazan Empire and the Roman Empire, and this is one that I didn't pick up on the first time, which is definitely that, like, oh, it's kind of this classic Roman view of, like, during their empire, there's like, oh, we used to be warriors, we were all tough, and now, the aristocrats, you're just soft senators, like, you're all you do is, like, get rich and fat and, like, sleep with a lot of priests, and that's it. And, like, he's basically evoking a similar, like, theme here, that he's like, we used to be badasses and now we're weak and everyone looks down upon us, and I'm not going to be like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. Yeah.
His character and the way, like, a lot of the bridge burners and soldiers speak, it reminds me a lot of, for some reason, the Black Company books. I don't know how much they're an influence, but
major influence.
Yeah, okay.
I can tell you, Erikson Esselmont talked, they were reading those books. I believe Esselmont turned Erikson onto those books while they were gaming this.
That makes sense.
Yes.
The soldiers and the empire and everything else does remind me a lot. Okay.
I've never read them. That's on
you
my
never
list.
read? Have any of you read them?
No, I kind
It's
of
on the
want
list.
to. So
They're
when we finish,
very good. They're very good.
In 3
But they're
years.
kind of old, I guess, by now. But they're pretty good. They're good.
yeah, I've been meaning
People
to
say
read
they're
them.
like the first sort of grimdark books. People quote them often.
Cool.
I don't know if they actually are. Like that, or what's the other guy? What's the white elf with the sword?
Michael Moorcock.
I was gonna say,
Moorcock,
an inspiration here. You can see, and
those two. Yeah,
Michael Moorcock. Those books are also grimdark. They are pretty sad, pretty bleak.
Fair
Already. So Ganos Perrin, he gets drafted into working for the adjunct. He goes through a portal and somehow ends up in the throne room, which I, to this day, have no idea. I can't follow the geography there. I have no idea how that happened.
The warren opens into the throne room.
Yeah.
It opens directly into... Okay, why were they, like, mad at him, though? Because he can't control where the portal opens.
Get off the horse and walk calmly inside instead of jumping through it.
Oh.
Okay, so he like charged in on his horse when he should have.
Yeah, and they were like, where do you think it goes?
Okay.
Like, it's not going to go into the latrines, right? It's going to go into an important part, probably.
Right.
I guess it could have been some sort of nexus for transportation, but I guess if the Imperial Warren is mostly, well, I guess these are things we don't know, but we kind of know that it's mostly used by high-ranking Imperial officers, right? It's not used by random soldiers, so it makes sense that it goes into some sort of noble or like a high-ranking location.
You would think Topper would have warned him, though, if like, by the way, you're gonna meet the Empress, like, be ready. She can with a word, have you executed. But it works out for him, and seems like in some ways, maybe he impresses them a little bit. I don't know.
The Empress kind of chill.
Yeah, she is. She does seem relatively. Feels like a weird word, knowing a lot about her, but in some ways she is very chill.
Was this the scene that made you like the Empress, Stan?
I don't remember. It's been a while. I just have vague impressions. So.
The one that definitely does it for me is book 2. We'll get
Yeah.
there.
Okay. But maybe I always like the bad guys. But I don't remember if she's a bad guy. So I don't know if that's the reason why I
Well,
like her.
she is
So,
party, we know, to conquest and murder.
well,
So
we do know that the bridge burners don't like her, and
yeah.
she seems to be doing something to them, killing them off, right? That's said in the second chapter. So
Yeah, that's a major thing we have to get to. Do we want to jump to that, or do we want to talk about the Warren at all? Or
Yeah, I was really
Steve, what are your
confused with that conversation with the adjunct and Paren. I didn't understand that really. So I get that he's kind of, it seems like he's in their, I guess, serving them now, I guess, but I didn't get the conversation about that discussion they had. I didn't really follow.
I think it's kind of like they're supposed to keep a low profile while they try to figure things out. Because if they attract too much attention, then maybe these important people are going to figure it out and we're going to be in trouble. That's how I sort of thought they were doing things.
I'm guessing that Lorne has some idea who or what set the hounds loose,
Yeah.
and she doesn't want them to know that she's on to them, so she wants Paran to keep a low profile until she calls on him to do something, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it something that's worth mentioning, I was skimming through this again too, is that she at least believes also the massacre is a diversion, right? That there is
Yeah.
something else going on, and that this massacre is essentially a big loud event to distract from some other subtle maneuverings happening. And what exactly those are, I don't know. We'll maybe find out. But
Yeah.
my understanding is she is like, Perrin, you seem smart and capable, so I want you to work under me, and that's why you're working for me. And to what end? I guess we'll see. But yeah, I think she just likes him, and so it's like, I
Yeah.
want you to work for me.
Yeah. He proved himself to be somewhat gritty, right, with all those, with how he surveyed the aftermath of the hounds. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
what else happens in this chapter? He goes home, has a funny conversation with a guard, and I guess
I
we
do
can.
like the Warren though. The Warren is very
It's creepy.
creepy and
Yeah.
interesting. I think I'm starting to remember vaguely some information about the Warren, which I'm not gonna say. But it is very like the tracks with is like, oh, something came through here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know,
Topper
it is a
freaks out about that.
Chain
and-
links.
Yeah, sort
yeah.
of.
And I guess if this is the first time you're reading, you're like, what the fuck is a Warren, right?
Yeah.
And it's confusing too because here they use it to move through somewhere, and then in the next chapter we find out that they channel some sort of magic through the Warrens, which it's both a place and a supply
Yeah.
of something.
Yeah.
So
For what we know now, it seems to be some sort of other parallel world or something that you can
Yeah.
travel through or you can siphon stuff through. It seems. But
Yeah.
that's as much as we know, kind of.
I think it's fair to say, I mean, one thing that I should say is, even with the full context of the whole Book of the Fallen, a lot of the magic isn't ever like fully explained. But I do think it's fair to say here is that, yeah, Warrens are a place, another dimension that also in some way fuels specific types of magic.
Yeah.
And the Imperial Warren clearly there's some weird, creepy shit going on there.
But it's interesting that it's called the Imperial Warren, as in it's like a government structure, sort of, you know?
Right. They claimed it too. Yeah, exactly. This is our
Like, did they build it? Did they, right? It's
interesting
interesting.
questions. Interesting questions.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on the Warrens, Steve? For the
I didn't
Imperial-
really get what they were the first time I read them, but now I have a better understanding of what they are. I was really confused. I should say the other two times I read this book, I was a little bit confused on it, but it makes more sense this time. I kind of had an oh okay moment when I was going through that. But I did like the the experience of him going through and before he finds the Empress. That was really neat, like Dan had mentioned. So
I guess for the people that did read The Black Company, it does remind me of the last two books. Very specific sections, which does remind me a bit, like especially the path and the description, and then seeing on the path and like tracks of something that was, you know, in that area. Anyways,
Interesting. Cool. Tattletale. And
Well, I just want to say, I think a scene worth highlighting, even though it is brief,
Mhm.
is Gano's going home,
yes.
and his dad is not there, and we know he has two sisters, and
Yeah.
he talks to one of them. This is a scene I will say in hindsight, I wish there was like another scene on top of it. I wish we got to meet his, so he's two younger sisters, one who
Yeah.
is 1 year younger than Tavor, who is a tough girl, we can see, and then another one, Felison, who is too sweet for the world. And I wish we got to properly see Felison, is what I will say here. But obviously, this is a name that we have seen earlier, and I won't say anything more. I think there's a lot to come. But Tavor and Felison, those are two characters to keep your eye on. And especially with the context of the whole series, this scene is much more meaningful, I think. I can tell you the first time I read it, I blew through it.
Yeah.
I did not even remember that Tavor
Who
was in it.
cares?
Yeah, I did not give a shit. And
Yeah.
this time it's like it is much more meaningful to see their
Yeah.
interaction.
Okay.
And I misremembered the whole thing and thought he met Felison, not Tavor, in this scene.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
like it happens so quickly. It's like a page or like a page and a half. And yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Whew. All right. Yeah, Tattersall. On to chapter
Tattletale
2.
and
The Siege of
Hairlock.
Vale.
Yeah. The Siege of Pale. There's a lot in this chapter.
Yeah, it's all stuff happening.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, we meet. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
I love Hairlock. I just mentioned that.
Oh, yeah.
Hairlock is great.
Hairlock
He's such a
is-
shit. I love him.
Yes. So we meet Tattletale at the tail end of a battle, and she's pretty grief-stricken and dazed, I guess. And then we get a flashback to when the battle started and a conference with I guess the other mages and the High Fist. No, just the Fist.
Yes.
High Fist.
High
Dujek.
fist, Dujik, one arm.
One arm. And then some interesting stuff happens with Hairlock.
Yeah. There's a lot of, how to say, suggestions of politics, which is not
Yes.
fully explained here. And, there's more going on, but I don't know what it is.
I can tell you, having read the whole series, I followed all of it. Basically everything.
Yeah.
There were like two characters they named that I was like, I have no idea who these people are. And otherwise, this is one of those conversations much easier to follow. Knowing
Yeah.
who all these people are and kind of where they go and the history better. But yes, I don't think I feel like this is a chapter that would be particularly hard on a first read through. Like when they're just talking about politics and not explaining any of this, like the only explanation you get is I feel like really is, and they build it up and it's kind of mysterious, but is all the stuff with like Kaladin Brood and Animander Rake, which is just basically like, who is the Lord of Moonspawn? Kaladin Brood is fighting with him. Oh, Kaladin Brood is this mythic figure who crushes anvils between his hands. Oh, and the poem that mentions how badass he is was actually really about this guy who's even more badass, Animander Rake, who is a lord of a dark elves, basically. They're black-skinned,
yeah,
long-lived people, and like truly black-skinned. Black is midnight.
100,000 years.
Yes.
Yes. And they say Kaladin Brood isn't a god or whatever, but he's named in Anomandaris, and this guy and the guy that this is about is apparently 100,000 years old. So Caledon Brood has to be in the ballpark of that age.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think something you find throughout this series is the borderline between gods and some other long-lived powerful people is kind of blurry. Like you have people like Kaladin Brood and Amanda Rake where you're like kind of a god, right? But like I guess not technically, but like kind of, you know? And it's there's an interesting, I think, vague, never fully defined relationship among mortality and immortality and power.
Yeah, and when Tatasale is in the company of Sorry and the Bridge Burners, she feels this, I guess, weight or of regard, and she thinks to herself that it feels like a god, but she can't quite place it, but her senses point her towards Sorry. So that's interesting.
I love something I didn't really pick up on with my first couple of reads was how tactile her experience with magic is. That like when she's around magic users, she has these different physical sensations. Like she smells something or tastes something weird. Like she feels a pressure. It's like the actual presence of magic is again, it evokes the senses in other magic users, that it's a reality that you can't escape. It is fundamental to that person's reality.
Yeah. And sorry, like totally jumping off to a separate thing, but since you brought up tactile and smell, there was this one particular instance when Dujik One Arm walks into the room when they're having that conference just before the battle. He's just shaved and he smells of cinnamon water, and she thinks to herself that smell she associates with security and stability. I thought that was a really nice touch of like how the senses play into, like, I think smell has a lot of association with memory, so that little bit detail was really nice.
Absolutely agreed 100%. There is a lot going on. What stood out, Steve and Dan, to you? What character stood out to you? Who do you like? Who do you dislike? We talked about Hairlock just a little bit. We talked about Kaladin Brood a bit. What stood out to you in this chapter?
Go ahead, Dan. You want to start us off?
Okay. Well, it's more like it's just so many questions, right? You have when you read this, because you're like, okay, well, what's the context of the Kaladin Brood and the what's it called, the floating island and
Moonspawn.
Yeah, Moonspawn. And okay, well, what's the context of the bridge burners getting killed off? What's the context of apparently the High Mage betraying them? What's the context of the weird magic done on to put what's his name? The guy in the puppet, right? What's the context of all of these things? Because they're all like in a vacuum and we don't know anything yet. So it's just adding questions, kind of this chapter. It's like setting things up and also like I wonder what is this? What's going on here and there, right?
Yeah, and I think when I read it the first time, I was also confused about whether I was understanding things correctly, because in the prologue, for instance, the person we meet as the sergeant of the bridge burners sends an order over to Dujek, but now we find out that he's some like low-ranking sergeant and Dujek is the high fist. So things have happened since we last met them, and I'm like, do I understand? I certainly got confused the first time around about, am I understanding these ranks correctly? Is sergeant somehow a higher rank than high fist, and am I misunderstanding what these terms mean? But yeah, I think in retrospect, I was reading it correctly at the time. But yeah, some of the even guesses that we may have, at least for me, it was like, am I reading this correctly at all?
Yeah. Plus, you're like, we've been in like 3 different places in each of the 3 chapters. We don't know how far they are apart temporally or spatially.
Mm,
And there's new characters in almost every one of them. So I remember reading the first time, I was like, I have no clue what's happening. Right?
yeah.
You just
I
know roughly that there's a battle, and maybe it's gonna be relevant later. And it seems like these are the characters we're gonna follow because they show up in more than one chapter. That's
Yeah.
I remember what I was thinking.
Yeah, I followed a lot more because I spent a lot less brain power tracking characters or trying to understand some
Yeah.
things that, like, trying to make sense of them, for sure. Yeah. So,
Also, I just very quickly want to
Hmm.
make a point about the character thing because that's obviously one of the big struggles. I'm trying to find the name of a character. Um, a surprising amount of them uh, have some level of import, I will say, but you don't necessarily have to remember them all.
Yeah.
That said, um, where is this dude? Oh yeah, uh, A. Caronis. I have no idea who the hell that guy is, and as far as I know, he's just a one-scene wonder. Now maybe he does come up again, and I've forgotten something. That is a real possibility.
Wait, which guy is that one?
He exactly right. He's one of the
his,
mages who fights in the battle, and
Oh,
as
it's the
far as
one
I
with the wife? The wife dies, or
no,
no,
that was
no,
no?
that's
Not that one.
Bellarden. Yeah.
not Nightchill
Yeah.
and
Okay.
Bellarden and Acoronis are 3 mages,
Oh
high
yeah.
mages
Okay.
who fight in the battle, and 2 of them die.
Yeah.
Sometimes characters are just there, so I
Yeah.
think it's important to kind of let them wash over you and trust that you'll remember and pick up on the ones that actually matter and recur. Um, I also
Yeah.
just want to say before I go to Steve for what stood out to him, what interests him here, is I do think it's important to highlight, if this wasn't clear, is the biggest plot thing that happens here, right, is that we know the Malazans are effectively eating their own, and we don't know
Yeah.
why. They're stabbing them in the back. Tayshrin murdered some of the mages, right, including Tattersail's boyfriend. And it seems heavily implied that the bridge burners were killed by their own. They were sent on a suicide mission and potentially blown up by their own people. So why are the Malazans backstabbing themselves? I don't know. We'll see. But that is the major point of tension and reveal, I think, in this chapter.
Yeah.
Yep. And Tadasale notices that in the heat of battle. So I really loved how that intrigue was set up. And I think I noticed and enjoyed that even the first time. I'm not sure I quite followed the end of that plot through the book the first time I read it,
Right.
but yeah, that was a pretty interesting point to bring up, certainly.
Steve, what stood out for you this chapter?
I think
What
the
do you want to
battle
talk
stood out for me. I was a little bit confused with because originally I thought it was Rake who killed everyone or most everyone. So I was a little
Mm.
bit confused with where the magic was coming from or where the damage came from. But it took me a little bit to realize that it was Tayshrin.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because initially it's set up like it is Rake, and then
Right.
after, like, she thinks, wait a second, maybe I did notice, but now that I think about it, that's right. That's what happened.
Yeah.
So it only comes out after.
Rake was indiscriminate, and the shots that killed Nigel and I forget the other guy's name were directional. That's what she notices.
Yeah.
Yeah, that took me a minute to kind of grasp what was happening, but it's a very epic. I hate using that word, but it's just like an epic battle. Pretty quick,
Yeah.
pretty early in
It
the
is.
book. You don't really get that too often. So
It does epic very well,
Oh, yes.
right?
Yeah.
very large scale. And
Yeah.
the moon spawn, I love just seeing just floating. It's neat.
And the imagery of the ravens, the great ravens,
Oh,
that was one
yes.
that really, like, very cinematic. That stood out. I could see it, right? The ravens sweeping up into this guy like a giant shadow, and they're just come down, you know, cawing this terrifying, badass force, and just fucking Animander Rake just standing up there on Moonspawn, just looking down, his like silver hair flowing in the wind.
Very
It's like,
Dracula sort of feel.
oh yeah, it's so funny to me that apparently, so I mean, needless to say, this is a character that a lot of people love, Animander Rake, right? Like he has such a cool entrance here, and he was apparently a character that Steven Erikson did not expect people. Is my understanding is he didn't expect Rake to be such a big hit with people, but you introduce him surrounded by these ravens, the lord of this fucking floating meteor, and he's just like standing there as like the coolest shit is happening around him. Like, yeah, people are gonna love that. I love my edge boy, Dark Lords.
And there was a poem about him, and he's apparently 100,000 years old. What's not to like?
Exactly,
I'm
exactly.
sure it was a different guy.
Well, okay, and talking about fantasy tropes again, right? Like this dude is evoking all the classic Dark Lord shit, right? Like he's like called like the Knight of Dark or like the Lord of Darkness, right? He has a creepy gothic fortress, right? He evokes Dracula imagery. He, is immortal. He has creepy poems written about him talking about how awesome he is. He has some sort of sword that is magical. Like this
Yeah.
dude is giving bad guy. We'll wait and see what his deal is, but I mean, oh, I love it.
The mane of chaos, apparently.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck that means.
Is his hair the mane of chaos?
Yeah, I was that was the thing I was wondering. Is like his mane means something else. I just think of like hair. Like what is he's the hair of chaos? What are
He
we
is the
talking
hair
about?
of chaos. Oh, chaos is a horse. That makes sense. Oh god, I forgot what I was going to say. The battle, the intrigue. Okay, I guess Hairlock and the ritual that turned him into a marionette.
Yes,
Yeah.
my hero.
Yes, I love that. I love the second bit of weird necromancy we got in as many chapters.
I mean, yeah.
And
Talk about another great introduction is Hairlock is introduced being a fucking asshole and also bleeding out, like missing the lower half of his body, but continuing to stay alive. Like what a great character entrance. Just truly like peak. And then he follows all that up by getting his soul turned into a puppet, like a marionette. That's awesome. That's so crazy. I love it.
and
This is the shit that sold me on this book series. Hairlock and like turning it into a marionette. I'm like, that's so cool. Like I'm here for it. All right, you got me.
And he's being snarky with half his body gone. He's being mean to Tatus.
Exactly. This dude is literally, his guts are hanging out and he's still talking shit. Like, you have to respect it.
Yeah. Wonderful. What I was gonna say technology. What magic they used to transfer it into the other body. And it's like, why don't they use it all the time? I guess they say it's like forgotten, but I'm wondering why now that this guy knows how to do it, why doesn't he use it for all his friends that seemingly have died? Right?
They have to want to come back as a marionette. Now, what sort of existence is this?
Yeah, I don't know. But there is some sort of, you're like, it seems like it was already prearranged. So there is some story we're missing here too, right? About the history of this magic and them with Hairlock, right?
Is there
clearly a strategy at play, right? They want Hairlock around for some reason.
Oh yeah, he made a deal, right? And he's got to have given them something in exchange for whatever they did for him. But also, do you think there's, I don't know if this is true, but some sort of price for the use of magic, so they can't always do stuff like this.
Maybe it's too expensive. It's like $1,000 per marionette. or like more like 100,000. So it's too expensive. Like
Exactly.
you cannot do it too often.
It's the D&D system, right? Or you have to pay a diamond
yeah,
to
gold.
pay someone.
Yeah.
So yeah, they just have to they don't have diamonds everywhere. You know,
Yeah.
they have like the one. They just like emptied their purses for this just to
That's
put
the
this
sort of
one
price you
dude
were
in the
talking about,
puppet.
Varsha, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Maybe. I wonder how it is living as a marionette. Maybe it's great.
Maybe.
It's great.
It's a great life. Doesn't need to eat. Does
Yeah.
he?
I'm trying to. I don't know. I don't remember anything about Herlock in the rest of the books.
Yeah.
Like about these things, how he enjoys it. But
Yeah. But also, I guess the other thing that we learn about the magic is slightly relevant in this context of
Mhm.
like the question you asked is Tatasale has a thought to herself that you try to reach for magic and whatever Warren answers is the one that you can
yeah.
pull magic off of. So the one that the mage uses to bring Hairlock back as a marionette, Tatasale does not recognize.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not something that can be channeled easily. Maybe. Or
Yeah.
Also, this random Quickbin, right? Name of the mage on the bridge burners. Seemingly like just a random wizard in the military and has access to some sort of magic that is apparently forgotten.
Hmm.
Weird shit going on with that
Yeah.
guy. A lot of weird shit with the bridge burners in general.
It's interesting that the bridge burners all have their names, which are like things, or they're not actual names, right?
It's the military
Why is he
name.
called Quickben? Did his girlfriend give him that name? I hope not. But I guess Ben is a name, but
Damn.
well, we don't know, I guess. We don't know how these people get their name, right?
That's true. Yeah.
But Kalam's name doesn't sound like
I guess so.
a
True.
nickname. Yeah.
I don't remember if it's his nickname actually. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I did notice. I remember noticing that
I mean,
a lot of their names are very.
The quick part has to be a nickname, right? And Whiskey Jack.
Yeah.
I think that's just everybody in the army gets a nickname, sort of. Maybe. We'll find out.
Maybe. Yeah, that's very army-like.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just give a good feel for the ambience, or like the sort of camaraderie between them, right?
And Sori's name is not a nickname. So it is, kind of, but she doesn't.
I mean, I guess at this point we don't know if that's her real name or not, right?
Yeah.
It's the name she gives when she enlists.
It does
Yeah.
seem like some sort of edgy stuff that you're like, oh, my name is Sorry, because that's what
Yeah.
you're gonna say when you kill or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It does
when,
seem.
when she gives Tatasale her name, she what's the line? I forget. Apparently, it's like a private joke with herself.
True. Yeah.
So, I don't know. What else was I gonna say? Kalam, Quickpen. Yeah, sorry, never mind. We're done with the subject of nicknames. I remember. So Tatasale again. About how maybe powerful Quickpen is. So Tatasale asks the sergeant, who the heck is this guy and why doesn't anybody know about him? And we know that she apparently she's been around 4 high mages recently and she's the head of the mage cadre. So she's been around magic and she thinks this guy they should know about him. So interesting person to watch out for, I guess.
Absolutely.
Another detail which I thought was interesting was she mentioned that she's like more. How old does she say she is? Like more than 100 years old. She does seem like.
Pretty old.
Yeah.
It seems
Her
like mages live
boyfriend
longer. Probably not all humans, but mages at least seem to live quite a lot longer.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. How old was Rigard, do we know?
Well, I don't know that.
Oh,
Yeah, definitely old.
Okay.
I mean, she was around before the Malazan Empire had conquered them, so, and we know the Malazan Empire is about 100 years old, so.
Yeah.
Well, maybe she conquered that part fairly recently. But we don't know, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Talking about magic, the deck of dragons reading at the end, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, this basically the deck of dragons is a tarot deck.
Yeah.
But the magic is real. Not to hate on all our tarot listeners, but and so we get an interrupted reading, right? That she decides to cut the reading short to take her fate into her own hands. What are your thoughts? The two cards that are drawn, right? The Knight of Darkness and Opon, the twins of chance, with a coin flipping between
Very
them and
interesting.
one's face.
Those decks in fantasy stories are always very evocative, right? And can be used in so many different ways for the plot, and right. And if you're running an RPG campaign, use tarot decks and stuff like that because they're very great for just
I love
role
it.
playing and
Yeah.
ideas. Like you can just flip cards and get ideas for things that are going to happen. It's just like here, right? You just flip a couple of cards, you have some mystique, and you're like, you suggest something that, well, we know kind of what's happening because we've read a bit about. But if you're not reading, you're like, maybe you get some vague idea, like fifth flavor of something, right?
Right. This is one that you definitely, with the hindsight, even just this book, like you know what it's kind of talking about. But I'm curious, do you all remember like reading the reading? Do you know kind of what it's foretelling and what the cards are referring to?
No. How can I say this without spoiling? I remember there's meaning and references later, but I don't remember what it meant. That was a really bad
So
non-answer.
any thought? I mean, I don't want to ask for your theories because you've read the book, but um, what are your thoughts about, where we're going from here?
I have no idea.
You
I
forgot.
know we're going to a city. I'm not going to say which city. Well, it doesn't matter. But we're going to go to a city for the rest of the book. Well, not the rest of the book, the next chapters, I think.
Yeah, in book 2.
So are we going to, I think the remainder of book 1 is about 30 or 40 pages.
Really? That's it?
Wait, what?
Because we're on chapter 3, right?
Oh, wait, because the book is divided into books. Okay, I was like, wait a second.
Yeah. But which copy are you looking at? Because I'm pretty sure it's a lot more than that in the mass market paperback.
Oh yeah, because I'm on the trade like you are. It's around page 83,
I
and
have a couple more questions about the second chapter.
yeah, of course.
Which I'm
Please,
like,
go.
didn't
Yeah, go.
remember. I didn't catch, maybe you guys catch, why were all the troops arrayed in front of the mages and then they got blasted by the ricochets from the magic bouts? Why didn't they just keep them somewhere else, like what's it called, the Morath or something? Why didn't they just keep it somewhere else, and when the battle between the mages is done, then they bring them in? It seemed like a waste.
I have a thought about it, but I think it's a spoiler. So
Okay, so it's not specifically said, but I didn't miss anything.
no, they don't explain the strategy. In fact, I would say a major point of that chapter and a point of conflict is they're not explaining what's going on to the soldiers, which includes the mages. They're just telling them, you need to go and fight.
Yeah. Because the mages one you can kind of understand. You're like, oh, well, the order is to attack the city, and then you're sent there, but then you have a mage that attacks them from behind, and that makes sense, right? Because it's explained, but the soldier is not explained. So, okay, I was just going to be sure I didn't miss anything. And the other thing is, like, what's it called? Are they called the Morath?
The Morinth, yeah.
Morinth? Yeah. Are they grasshoppers, or am I imagining that?
No, they have like bug armor and maybe bug appearance underneath the armor.
But does it say which bugs they are? I don't know. In my mind, I'm thinking grasshoppers, but I don't know if that's actually mentioned anywhere or if I'm just imagining it. Okay, it's not mentioned anywhere.
I don't know.
Fair enough.
I don't think grasshopper is specifically said.
Okay.
If that's what you're asking, yeah.
Okay.
They do get a description, but they'll come up again. I'm sure we'll continue to
just
address.
insect-like. But they are insects, right? They're not humans wearing insect stuff.
I think they're another species, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So are we doing 4 through or 3 through 5?
3 through
I know
5.
that's
Yeah.
weird because we're kind of getting into the next book, but I don't know that 100 pages is just going to work out evenly with the parts of the book. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
should
think
we read further than that? Do you want to go to the first or second Darujistan chapter?
I'm good with
I
whatever.
What do you
also have the
think, Steve?
paperback, the trade paperback, so I don't know what 100 pages is in the mass market.
So I think the in the mass market, like I'm looking at the Amazon sample, it's about 50 pages to go to the end of chapter. Okay, we can finish planning after we finish recording, and then I'll post in the description how far we're going to read for the
We
next
should
week.
just do exactly 100 pages. You finish at that page, and it's like, oh shit.
Whatever
Yep.
100 pages is,
Yep.
that's it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think 100, because I like to think 100 pages in the trade is chapter, it's almost, chapters, the beginning of chapter 7 or chapter 8, I think was
Yeah.
better. But it's, we'll figure it out
Yeah.
and then
We'll figure it out.
post it.
Do you have quotes? Do you guys have quotes?
I don't. What's wrong with me?
Steve,
What's wrong with you?
you gotta do quotes. How will we do quotes without you to start us off?
I know. What's going on? I will come with quotes next time.
Okay, sounds good.
My quote, it would be the one I read at the opening poem. I love it. It's just the language is evocative. It's got a rhythm to it. And it's meaningful.
Very good.
I think
Yeah.
reading it in isolation, it's a good poem, and reading it then with the context of the series, it's even better.
I agree. I have a few, but I'll just do a couple, I guess. There's one about when Tatasale was remembering what she knew about Kaladin Brood. The name of the man commanding the Tistandi alongside the Crimson Guard did sound familiar, but in an old way, echoing ancient legends, perhaps, or some epic poem. And I like a lot of the of Tatasale's introduction. She found herself listening to a deeper silence, and how she kept focusing on the empty armors of the dead soldiers. Like, the armors are empty. That's interesting. I didn't think of that before. Like, they've just sort of disappeared. Yeah. And the silence within those empty shells rang like a dirge in Tatasale's head. There's a lot I've underlined in Tatasale's introduction. That's really cool.
Similarly, the prologue, the way it ends, has a number of quotes that stand out to me. So for starters, the man we come to know as Whiskey Jack says, taking up the sword is the last act of a desperate man. And then in a couplet, it's really just the meaning behind the writing here that appeals to me. The world, Gano said, doesn't need another wine merchant. The commander's eyes narrowed, gauging. He opened his mouth to make the obvious reply, then shut it again. It doesn't say it, but I kind of didn't properly interpret on an early read through. The obvious reply is the world doesn't need another soldier, right? But he stops himself from saying that. I think that's was just a wonderful interaction. And then the last thing is Gano's at the very end watching and smelling, a burning building, basically burning cloth, burning something sweet. And he says, an abattoir has caught fire. Gano said, pigs. He thinks it's burning pigs. It's burning people that he's smelling there. He's smelling human flesh burning. And that's just something that I completely missed the first time, that I found very, I think, speaks to the writing, that kind of subtlety, but it's definitely there. You can interpret it and follow the drama unfolding.
Yeah. I've got one last, I've got several, but I'll just do one more to close this off. The great ravens. Thousands upon thousands of great ravens. They must have nested among the crags and bogs in the moon's surface. Their shrieks grew more defined, a caterwaul of outrage. They wheeled out from the moon, their 15-foot wingspans catching the wind and lifting them high above the city and plain. I just love how they were introduced, and this image of them. I think we talked about that earlier, of them just coming out of that, of the moon spawn. That's pretty brilliant.
Amen.
Do you have any, Dan? Sorry.
Can I remember any quotes? I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe Hairlock, I'm a marionette or something. I don't know. I'm sure he has said something like that. I'm sure.
Okay.
He has some
Or
great lines. He does.
yeah, he does have some great
So
lines.
sassy.
Probably not bad lines.
I'll just add one really quick before we wrap up. It's kind of close. It's close to the one I read at the beginning of the episode, but the best life is the one the gods don't notice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Words to live by.
Very apt to other series too.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, true that.
Yeah.
And very apt to also Greek mythology that Carl mentioned earlier in this discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think his style of writing is like, it's very, I don't have any trouble read. It flows quite well. It feels modern, vibrant, like fresh, right? So I enjoy. It's quite easy to read. Like just not the content, but the writing style.
Yeah, I
It's well
agree.
written.
Yeah.
It flows. Yeah.
And there's a lot of like it. So I think when we were reading Baker, we highlighted a lot of individual lines, at least in the first series, that felt very profound and meaningful. I feel like with Erikson, it's a lot of like long passages that build up to something big and beautiful.
Yeah.
I have to figure out how to do quotes when we get to those parts.
But in Erikson, it's way. I feel it's way more. It flows more easily. I don't have to ponder the sentence as I'm reading it to understand exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely not as archaically written. It is, the prose itself is a little more straightforward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
But it
different
fits very well to it, sort of, soldierly like centered series like this.
Yeah.
Right. Like the gallow humor of a lot of the conversation and the way they talk. It's very well fitted.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. On that note, I guess we will see everybody next week with whatever number of chapters we determine. That'll bring us to about 100 pages, probably in the mass market paperback, not 100 pages in the trade. That might be too much. But yeah, so we'll post that in the description for how far we're going to go next week. Once again, if you'd like to join us for these discussions, either here in the actual discussion group, we record on Tuesday nights, US times. And if you'd like to just talk to us about the books on the forum, consider checking out the pagechewing forum. That's where we do all of the planning. Yeah, so should we do outros, or I guess this is the group that will meet pretty much every week, so maybe we'll only occasionally do intros and outros, but for now, maybe we'll start the series with outros. Steve, could you kick us off?
Yeah, find me on pagechewing.com. I'm easy.
Cool.
I'm taking
Are you
up for
trying to
Dan.
be Dan?
Okay. Yeah, everybody knows who I am. I'm famous, right? I don't need an outro, but
Okay.
you can find me somewhere on pagechewing.
Yeah, ideally find me, Carl D. Albert, on pagechewing as well. Although I am on Instagram, I believe just it's my name, like Carl D. Albert. And occasionally I'm on Reddit. I'm actually on Reddit a lot, but mostly lurking. But occasionally I post things. And
Is it your official
Twitter
Reddit that you use to publicize your book, or your personal?
I have in the past, but mostly I use it to just post stupid shit and argue about books on the internet. And then, yeah, Truth of Crowns you can find in print, wherever books are sold in the United States. Amazon's always the easiest, to be honest. That's definitely the easiest, and that's where the ebook is as well.
Very nice. And I guess I'll try and remember to post the links to all of that in the description. And whenever we don't do intros, I'll carry forward all of that. Anyway, you can find me on the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain. That's where we post these episodes, as well as on Steve's podcast. I think it's called the Pagechewing podcast. I might also post it as a separate podcast, mainly for convenience purposes to publish to YouTube. But yeah, if people prefer to listen to it in podcast form, check out Steve's Pagechewing podcast. And yeah, that's it. We'll see everybody in a week. Thank you so much for listening. We're very excited to have started this off. Bye.